I'm Jane Applegath. This is the Epic Vision Zone, where bold ideas meet extraordinary leaders. What if your high performing culture is the most toxic thing in the room? And what if the behaviors you've normalized at work are quietly costing organizations their best talent, trust, and future growth? Today on the Epic Vision Zone, we're joined by a leading authority on workplace culture and the fight against toxic work environments. Catherine Mattice is the founder and CEO of Civility Partners, an organization developed and a firm dedicated to helping leaders transform toxic workplace cultures into respectable, high performing environments. Since founding Civility Partners in 2008, Catherine and her team have worked with more than 250 organizations, including Chevron, NASA, Stanford University, and many more. A TEDx speaker, an award winning author, and globally recognized HR leader, Catherine has been featured and a contributor in Forbes, Entrepreneur, Inc. magazine, CNN, and many more. She's also created over 50 courses on LinkedIn Learning, reaching leaders worldwide with actionable strategies for culture change. Catherine is the author of 4 books, including her new release, Navigating Toxic Work Environments for Dummies, a must read guide for leaders and employees navigating challenging workplace dynamics. Like her book, Catherine delivers real world tools that help leaders build a thriving culture where people and performance can truly create an epic success. Welcome, Catherine. Thank you for joining us here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, as I was saying just briefly before we got started with Catherine, this is a topic at the top, I believe, of every corporation today. So we'll delve into this, and I know you're going to have some great insights. So give us an idea what inspired you, Catherine, to decide to have this career of transforming toxic workplaces into thriving cultures.
It was the universe telling me this is what I should do. So I was an internal HR leader in an organization and just found myself working in a toxic culture. And quite honestly, it was a pretty good culture. I had a great boss. We had one very toxic person who drove people out of the organization consistently. I spent a lot of time talking to the boss about addressing the behavior. I was dealing with all of that turnover, and I just really saw firsthand the damage that this behavior was causing the organization, as well as people, myself included. I definitely was on the receiving end of his not so nice behaviors. I would say he was a workplace bully. While I was working there, I decided to get a master's degree in communication and ended up doing all of my graduate research on the topic of workplace bullying. Turned out at the time there was about 30 years of academic research on this topic. Other countries prohibit workplace bullying. In the United States, it's perfectly legal behavior. And so I just really, it was therapeutic. I found it fascinating. And right out of graduate school, I wrote my first book called Back Off. Ken Blanchard was interested in it and wrote the foreword. And I just decided I had the knowledge and ability and, excitement to jump in and create this new space. So that's what I did.
Wow. Kudos to you. Unbelievable. I love that title, by the way, Back Off. That says it
Thank you.
all. And just so surprising that you said that in the US that this bullying, workplace bullying is allowed or maybe tolerated is the better word.
Yeah.
Hopefully that is shifting. But this is why we're here to discover how to do this. But yes, I mean, like you said, it was the universe and you took that and ran with it. So
Yeah.
thanks for doing this. So as a woman leader in a field that's dominated by traditional HR perspectives, which I know must be really tough, how
Mhm.
have you carved out your unique voice and platform?
I'll give you a kind of my step by step and also a more maybe theoretical answer. So, when I first started Civility Partners, bullying wasn't a thing, employee experience wasn't a thing, employee engagement maybe was gaining a little bit of traction. So I was really being a trailblazer, and I didn't think about it maybe at the time, but looking back, I was. And I would call up HR associations, in different professional chapter meetings. Can I be a speaker at your chapter event? And was told no many times because what's workplace bullying? That's not a thing. And then once I started getting a yes and then another yes, and word started to spread, I started getting emails. I heard you did this presentation. Can you come and do one at our chapter meeting? So then it kind of went from there. In terms of kind of my voice and what I'm doing, HR has a long way to go still. It's come a long way, but HR is very compliant oriented, obviously. Unfortunately, a lot of CEOs see it that way. Leaders, organizational leaders see HR as a cost center that's managing benefits and things. And I think I am one of the voices that have really helped start to move that needle, that HR can be a very strategic partner. They should be in the C-suite. And really trying to give HR a lot of tools to do that and be that. And their job is the human part, not the compliance part. Compliance too, but human is more important.
Right, right. And it's interesting because it's almost as if they require two divisions because like you said,
Mhm.
there is the compliance, there's a lot of legal aspects, there's the benefits, which is really, the organization and the legal aspect. But then there's the human aspect, which is actually as far as you and I are concerned, most likely it's a different entity. And this is
Yeah.
where they fall short because to put them all together, for one thing, I think is the work overload. And
hmm
also, you're using two different skill sets, if I might
Yeah,
put it that way. Because,
left brain, right brain. And yeah, so
right,
HR should maybe always come in a pair. The left brain and the
ex-
right brain are two different people.
exactly, 100%. Well, in your new book, Navigating a Toxic Workplace for Dummies, love the title, by the way, offers actual tools for people feeling stuck in unhealthy environments. How can leaders recognize when they are contributing to toxicity even unintentionally?
Yeah. Well, one is that leaders need to be open and willing to take feedback and create that psychologically safe space so that they can understand when they might be contributing it because people will come to them. So you could be toxic in one way where maybe you're interrupting people or you make snarky comments, but if in other ways you can create psychological safety around, like, I am open to feedback and will take it in even if maybe I have a tough exterior. That's an important component, and that's something we work with when we're coaching leaders. The other is just looking around. If you're a leader with high turnover in your team or performance isn't that great, you feel like people are making a lot of mistakes, that's not a them problem. That's a you problem. And so paying attention to that and really always asking yourself, what role am I playing in this turnover or mistakes or whatever it is? Look around, pay attention to the vibe.
Yeah, I love that. Pay attention to the vibe, the energy that's in the room. It's like
Mhm.
you said at the beginning, you had one individual in the corporation that was upsetting everyone. Wow,
Mhm.
that's really
Yeah.
powerful. And unfortunately, when those people appear, they do that. They're disrupting. Yeah,
Yeah.
they
And so the interesting, this is in kind of a ironic question you're asking me, because that's part of the problem is most people who are contributing to toxicity don't know that they are, and they're not socially, emotionally intelligent, right? Otherwise, they'd recognize the guy I worked with. He would have said, "Gosh, a lot of people come and go in my department. What's that about?" Um,
Mm.
Part of it too, though, was that the leader wasn't willing to speak up to him. The leader needed to say, "Hey, you've got too much turnover in your department. I'm hearing from HR that people complain about your behavior." And so there's this relationship between the boss of the toxic leader or bully and the person engaging in the behavior. And often that person is a very high performer, or they have a lot of
Mhm.
organizational knowledge, or they have contacts in the industry that the company's relying on. And so the leader is afraid to sort of poke the bear. So we when we coach these individuals, the way we make it clear that they're creating a toxic environment is by interviewing people and then reading the interview notes. Essentially, it's more than that, but that's the basic idea. And they're often very appalled. They know that people think they're hard to work with, but they didn't realize the real damage that they were having.
Right. Yeah. It takes a lot for someone to recognize that, but also as a leader to weigh the positive against
Mm-hmm.
the negative, because
Mm-hmm.
I've worked in corporations as well, and they, I believe they're working on an ancient philosophy or whatever you want to call it, leadership program. But
Mm-hmm.
it's coming around thanks to people like you. So
Yeah.
you talk about civility and as a strategy rather than just a nicety. So tell us a little
Mm-hmm.
bit more about that idea.
So, having a culture that creates civility and respect is a strategy, just like building more market share or purchasing another company or whatever organizational strategies you have. Culture should absolutely be a part of that. And that's something that we do. Culture feels very abstract for a lot of people and leaders, and so they don't understand how to maybe do that. But it's like if we say we want to buy $1 million company or a company that's making 1 million in revenue by the end of 2026, here are the steps we're taking. Here are the KPIs along the way to make sure we're going to hit our goal. And you can do that with culture. You can say, we want a more respectful culture. How do we achieve that? Well, we probably need to start with a survey, understand what's going on and what's causing incivility and disrespect. And now we have data and we can see that people feel like their manager doesn't understand their problems. And so there's tension there. So we can address that and provide some strategies there. So you can, just like any of these other things that feel more tangible and quantifiable, you can do that with culture in general. And so, treating civility as a measurable skill is important. You can, um, require people to engage in the core values that the company says it's living. You can measure people on that. And then there really is an ROI, and that's what makes it a strategy. You can measure turnover, you can have a goal to improve what's said in exit interviews. So exit interviews aren't complaining. It's more about people saying, I loved working here. I'm just ready for the next step. So yeah, the civility is a strategy that saves money too. Obviously turnover and the gossip and the time people spend complaining to each other about incivility, the lack of motivation because they just got yelled at. That stuff doesn't appear on your profit and loss, but we all know it costs something. And so uh, turning those things around so there's less gossip and less distraction from work, you can measure more productivity and all of the things. So yes, civility is a strategy.
Yeah. It definitely has an effect on the bottom line. There's no question
Mhm.
about it. And the larger the
Mhm.
corporation, I believe, possibly the more difficult the application, only because you have a department upon department and all those different heads. But you're absolutely right. And, this is the change that is now here today. And I believe that, this is why a lot of individuals are considering leadership as a not just as a learned skill, but something that has to be above and beyond, where you treat your people and then give them the reins to go and do their thing. Because it
Right.
really, that's the trust, like you said, building culture. It's interesting because I worked with a company recently, and they were at a loss as to what their culture was. They said that we need a culture, and this is a large company, but it had
Hmm.
gotten lost through COVID and then the shutdown, and then they wanted people to come back, and of course that
Hmm.
was a big issue. And
Hmm.
I think one of the things was missing, like you said, was the culture, because people didn't miss what wasn't there.
Right.
And so, yeah, when people
Yeah.
felt like they were part of something grander, something meaningful, then I would believe a more larger majority would have been excited to come back as opposed to working
Yes.
virtually. Yeah.
I agree.
So,
And just kind of while we're on that topic of what is culture, even, it's the way people think and act. And
mm,
because that's the definition, it's about shared expectations. A lot of times people think of culture as just the way people are acting and that it's about the people. And certainly it is, but it's also about the way the organization is acting and what's the organization's behavior. And then also what is the leadership team's behavior. So we call that the oil model: organizational, individual, and leadership behavior. Those three things make up culture. And I always encourage any organization, any HR professional, ask yourself, if these are our core values and we want people to live these, what is the organization doing or not doing that helps or hinders that behavior? So, for example, if the leader's saying we want everybody to be respectful and high performing, well, hey, if you're allowing bullying, you're not facilitating high performance and respectful behavior. And so that's part of making culture a strategy. And I'll just add one other thing. Unfortunately for HR, the uphill battle is that because turnover and lower performance due to a toxic manager, for example, isn't on a profit and loss statement, it can be hard to really convince a leader that this is something we should spend money on. And even though logically it makes sense to the leader that, yeah, if someone's unhappy they may perform less, but look at we're meeting all our revenue goals and we're all of our sales goals, and so why would we spend money on solving the problem? We like to ask in our survey, essentially, does the way you're treated improve your performance or hurt your performance? And so, we can't attach a dollar to that, but it can be interesting to show a leader that, hey, 70% of people said their performance isn't that great because of the way that they're treated. So, anyway.
yeah, no, that would be a really good conversation with
Yeah.
getting into a corporation, because I would think that most people, leaders, would want their employees, their workers, to be high performing. In a
Mhm.
sense that they come to work, they're energetic, they see the vision, they're all part of one, working towards a specific goal, and
Mhm.
it just makes a whole changes the energy and shifts the enthusiasm, and high performing. Okay, you've got great numbers now, but let's say we can make it better for you.
Yep.
And this is where it starts, is with the people. Of course, we don't want to get into the tech stuff, because that's shifting bi-weekly. I keep seeing, robots are going to be doing this and robots are going to be doing that. It's like, okay, we need an HR department. Oh my gosh,
I
that's
know
crazy.
there's going to need to be an AI HR to manage the AI people.
Exactly. Oh my Lord. We'll have to be all computer techs, but well, thank you for that, because I do agree. And there's still such a number of individuals that are going to, believe me, be interested in this topic, because a lot of people do work in corporations and they do need to be seen and heard and have a culture. So the
Yeah.
Epic Vision Zone, Catherine, celebrates women like yourself who are trailblazers and change agents. How do you
Hmm.
see the role of women in leading culture transformation at work?
All right. Well, I'm going to say some things that are stereotyping women and men, but stereotypes exist for a reason. So, one is that women tend to more often be better at modeling things like empathy, relationships, building a community, kind of working together. And that is just more in women's nature because of our role in our species. And so women can be, and I'm not saying men can't or don't or won't, but just in general, women can perhaps um, make psychological safety more normalized and translate their empathy and how they function into the systems in the organization. So I think women are, in general, again, here I am a civility person and I'm stereotyping, but that women generally are more empathetic leaders. And so if we can have more women leaders, I think that would help culture evolve. I think, I don't know, no research to back this up, but if I'm telling a woman CEO, I think people are feeling hurt by the culture, they're not being heard, or there's gossip, or whatever's the toxic problem, that a woman may empathize more with that message and the people than a male CEO. Not all across the board, just in general.
Well, yes, and there's also that generational gap because a lot of CEOs are still of the older generation. They're
Yes.
the male or the female leaders. I mean, even the female leaders that are of that generation tend to be a little more hard ass. I'll say that
Yes.
because you might approach a female leader and she would go to hell with it. They just have to put up
Right.
with it because I used to be in an industry where it was male dominated, and the women who were really successful were really tough.
For sure.
They took
You
on
had
their
to have
male.
those masculine characteristics, quote
Exactly.
unquote,
Yeah.
to succeed in a leadership role.
Right, right. So there's the yin and the yang, but I mean, even for men, the feminine, we both carry both entities within us. It's just whether or not we tap into that. But absolutely, I agree 100%. And the top skills for leaders these days, all of them fall into a female category. Like you said, empathy, collaboration, communication. There are two others I don't recall, but those are all female dominated skills. So it is
Mhm.
very interesting for sure. So thank you for that information, Catherine. And here's something. Name a few soft skills then, and maybe you did right there, that leaders
Mhm.
are ignoring that are top performance drivers in a cultural transformation.
Yeah, I've named some of them already, but to answer your
Mhm.
question, feedback, and that's giving and receiving feedback. So, the problem in a lot of the toxic leader scenario, as I said, the boss is conflict avoidant for whatever reason. And so they're not willing to be courageous in giving the feedback to that individual and holding them accountable. And then also making it known that I'm open to your feedback and I would like for you to be courageous and come to me. And I may not like what you say, but I will take it in. And just, creating that collaboration around how we're supposed to behave and modeling that. So, feedback is a big training program that we offer, that giving and receiving feedback, because I think it's so important. And I really see a civil culture, if I were to define like what's the end goal for my clients, it's that people can give feedback, because we can do all the training in the world on civility and respect and psychological safety and all the things. And the organization can do everything in the world to really hold people accountable to that. But in the end, we're human and we're going to make mistakes and we're going to make a joke that somebody finds hurtful or make a mistake that's disrupting the organization. And so that's, in my mind, the ultimate, that people feel comfortable to give and receive feedback. That is, in
Mhm.
my mind, the pinnacle of a civil work environment. Um, And then the other piece is accountability, that we have to hold each other accountable. And I mean, I think that kind of goes along with the feedback component. But, to be able to say, I felt hurt yesterday when you said that in a meeting or did that or sent that email. Can we talk about it? So the other part of that too is vulnerability. That all requires vulnerability to feel, and that's changing, as you said, being the hard ass at the top as younger generations come up, that will shift. And I hope with things like COVID and all this talk about equity and inclusion and all of these kind of buzzwords right now, hopefully they evolve into feeling comfortable to be vulnerable and normalizing that humans are not cogs in a wheel, they're humans, and let's let them be human. And that circles right back to human resources is about managing humans. Part of that is compliance, but that shouldn't be the main part. The main part is allowing people to be human.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, the compliance should be, like, as we said earlier, a different department, because
Yeah,
it really is not about managing the compliance end. It's about managing the humans that are
right.
making your company successful, really. So you did give us a couple of earlier warning signs of a toxic workplace. You mentioned, the loss of, say, employees and gossip and that sort of thing. Are there any others that you noticed that are commonly ignored by some of the leaders?
Yeah, I mean, I'll make kind of pull up from that. Anytime a leader's observing or hearing about behavior that is perhaps more subtle or not against the law or not against a company policy, that behavior should be addressed. And that's always my message. I always talk about a spectrum where there's incivility, microaggressions, conflict that's maybe getting out of hand and causing some problems, jokes at someone's expense, these sort of, I hate to say lower level because they're still harmful, but they're behaviors that aren't against any sort of corporate policy. They go against core values, though. There aren't any core values, to my knowledge, that say, let's bully everybody and gossip and exclude people, right? So just paying more attention to those types of behaviors, because when you don't, that is how it evolves into bullying and harassment. And I mean, I don't want to go off the rails, apologies, but I will. Like harassment prevention training programs are often about the compliance component of harassment. Here's what counts as sexual harassment, and here's what you should do, and here's what your manager should do. And we need to know that, but that's not preventative. That's here's what happens when you're harassed. Harassment prevention is here's what you should do when you hear about gossip or jokes at someone's expense or microaggressions, because when those behaviors are allowed to go on, it normalizes toxic behavior and people become used to it. That's just how it is, because it's how it is here. And so I tolerate it, and people continue to push the boundaries, and eventually it can evolve into these real severe toxic behaviors.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting because we live in different times these days, and I
Mhm.
haven't worked in a corporation for a long time. But in our day, we didn't have the advent of social media.
Yep.
And I'm thinking, if you were a younger person and you worked for a good corporation and you were doing very well, but you quit because of something to do with the toxic environment,
Mhm.
uh, there's also that kind of feedback, if you want to put it that way, that becomes media absorbed, because you'll find that the young people will come on board and say, well, that's a toxic environment, depending on what the story is. So it's just an interesting time that we live in these days because, you always go on to see a review, whether it's for your book, whether it's a
Mhm.
product on Amazon, you want to see if people have used it or whatever it might be. And it's just a thought that popped into my mind. I have a young niece. She works for herself. She's an entrepreneur. Good for her. But it's a very interesting time that we live in. So the corporations, it just depends on where you are in your life and what you want to make a career out of. Obviously, if you want to be in some sort of niche and all those corporations talk with each other, you probably don't want to shoot yourself in the foot. But it's
Right.
just interesting, you know.
Well,
That's
and
it's
there's companies like Glassdoor. I think Glassdoor might be the only one of its kind. I'm not aware of any others, but you can anonymously talk about the workplace and your manager and all the things. And I love the concept of Glassdoor. Unfortunately, I don't think it forces employers to care about culture the way maybe Glassdoor had hoped it would, and the way I hope it would. But um, there's a lot of, or commenting on things out there. Somebody writes an article about the company you work for. You can go in the comments generally and comment
right,
anonymously. Hey, I've
right,
worked there, and here's how it is at this organization. So
right.
companies do need to pay attention to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And something, a red flag for your business as well. I say, oh boy, we got to get in there and do some house
Yes.
cleaning for sure.
Yes.
Well, Catherine, what's the legacy that you hope to leave through your work for individuals, organizations, and the next generation of leaders?
For individuals, the legacy I'd like to leave is just this idea that we need to pause and empathize and be more curious about each other. It's hard in this busy day and age with so much information coming at us, but the only way that you can treat somebody the way that they want to be treated and with respect in the way that works for them is by being curious about them. So that's the legacy I hope to leave. For organizations, I'd like for them to move past engagement. Engagement surveys are all the rage. That does not measure culture. It measures the level of engagement. It can be an indicator of what your culture is like, but I get that all the time. Oh, we do an engagement survey. Cool. But you don't understand your culture. So, for organizations to move more into culture and recognizing how strategic it really can be and how important it is, that's the legacy I'd like to leave for organizations. And for the next generation of leaders, I would love for them to see that HR is a fantastic partner. If you'll let them in, they will provide all sorts of great advice and insight. Humans run the company. AI might run part of your company, but you need humans to manage the AI. So I would love for leaders to pay more attention to culture and humans and give human resources more partnership in leading the company.
Right. Yeah. That might be an interesting thing with the AI because they don't have any emotions. So they might be a good judge of culture and civility in a workplace because it would be non-biased. I don't know why that just popped into my head, depending on the program and what they're running. But yeah, because it would be, they're not emotionally attached or whatever to whomever. So
Yeah.
yeah. Well, speaking of, it's mindset here. If a listener feels powerless at work right now, what's
Mhm.
one mindset shift that you encourage them to start with today?
To make the decision that they can control the situation. If you're feeling helpless, it's because you feel out of control or that you don't have control. And you can control the situation. You can't control the person or the toxic group of people or what have you, but you have control over the situation. And once you see that, you can make better decisions about your next steps.
Yes, you have a choice.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Life is all about choices. And perspective as well. So that's great
Yeah.
advice. Thank you for
I
that.
always say we are the product of our choices. Every
Mm,
second of every single day, practically, we make a choice. And who you are right now in this moment is because of your choices, not because of other people. And it's so easy to say, well, this happened or that happened, or I got fired, or my boyfriend dumped me, or whatever. But you're here because of your choices.
yeah, 100%, always. And
Hmm.
it takes us a while to learn that. They should,
Hmm.
something that should be taught in school. But, as we get older, wiser, we understand that we are the product of our choices. But thank you for that tidbit. That's perfect. Well,
Hmm.
how do you take care of yourself then, your own well being, when helping others navigate toxic environments?
I am a severe introvert. As much as I love being out in the spotlight, I really recharge by myself. And so I make sure I have time to myself. It kind of goes in my calendar. Oh, Thursday's open. I'm going to leave it open and I'm not going to do anything. I joke, I like to sit and stare at the wall. That's not what I'm doing exactly, but it's a good metaphor, just to be able to sit and think and process what's going on around me. Doing what we do can be very hard. I've gotten off calls with clients who were crying and felt helpless and told me about some horrible things going on. And, I was recently an expert on a case against a airline where I'm totally drawing. I gotta say this again. I was an expert witness on a court case against an airline where the um, airline, the stewardess, I want to say, but that's not the right word. The attendants were suing the airline because they were being sexually harassed by the pilots, and apparently that's a fairly common thing in the airline industry. And they had asked to be in their own hotel away from the pilots. So the pilots are in one hotel and they're in a different hotel to avoid the knocks on the door that apparently come in the night from the pilots, who are generally male. And the organization said, no, that's not efficient or cost effective for us. And when I think about something like that, that you might go to work every day where your organization has said costs and efficiency are more important to us than your real safety, and there's a door, and so physical safety may not feel important to the organization because the airline attendant doesn't have to open the door, but that's still scary to be laying in bed knowing someone's knocking on your door and for your organization to say, we're not willing to put in the resources to solve it. I mean, that's the kind of stuff I'm experiencing and seeing, and I have real empathy for. And so self care is super important. And that's how I get it.
Yeah, boy, that's something else. I would say it's time to leave. They're, putting money over human, but it's just unbelievable,
Yep.
that happens in today's day and age. But
Hmm.
therefore, therein lies the court case, you know,
Hmm.
and
Yep.
yeah, I'm sure that the airline is not going to win it. I'm just putting
I
it
don't
out
think they
there.
will, especially after the
No,
letter that I wrote.
good for
And there was
you.
certainly a lot more. That was just one thing I read that really struck me. And I put that in my report. If you empathize with your employees, imagine what that must have felt like. And that's the problem, the lack of empathy for that. Yeah, it may cost a little bit more for them to be in different hotels, but they'll be a lot more loyal to you. And when you're more loyal, you're doing better work.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, and the turnover. I mean, I guess there's not a whole bunch, but I understand making the space is what I call it.
yeah.
So we all need space to breathe. It doesn't matter what we do for a living. It's
Mhm.
very beneficial to our well-being, and making space, whether that's a walk, whether that's just sitting and reading, or just taking time for yourself. That's what I call it, is making
Yep.
space. That's when we get to the awareness. That's when we tap into our consciousness. That's when we power down so that we
Mhm.
can power up. That's what we
And
need.
the amount of creativity that comes out of getting time to yourself. You know, a lot of leaders, it's all over professional or personal development messaging, and I know people who do it, and I'm trying to do it more. The leaders and CEOs who shut down and disappear for a week, I know plenty who go rent an Airbnb by themselves,
Mm.
and they probably spend the first couple days just sort of powering down, and then they can spend the next couple days strategizing for the organization and for themselves and building their own health and wellness and happiness. It's very important.
Yes, absolutely. There's a beautiful saying that goes, to the mind that is still, the universe surrenders.
Love it.
That's it. Yeah. So thank you for that, Catherine. So what's one epic vision you have for the future of workplaces?
Epic vision that everybody has the courage to stand up for themselves. That's my epic vision. I think I would entitle the vision, everyday courage. Like I said, you're a product of your choices all along the way. And each time you choose not to stand up for yourself or others, you're allowing things to happen. You're saying it's okay. And everybody needs more courage. It's not in our nature to throw ourselves in front of a bus and create conflict if we feel like we can get away without creating it, but it needs to happen. We all need to say more about what we need and how we want to be treated and hold people accountable.
Absolutely. 100%. Well, tell our audience, Catherine, how best to connect with you and to purchase your book.
So my book's at all the retailers. Everybody uses Amazon, so maybe start there. The book is, Amazon. It's called Navigating a Toxic Workplace for Dummies by the Wiley Publishing Company. You can just go to civilitypartners.com. That's our website. Certainly find me on LinkedIn at Catherine Mattice. I have another website called catherinemattice.com for my keynote speaking that I do. So just Google me. You'll find all sorts of access to me.
Wonderful. Well, that's great. I love that. And of course, we'll have all that information available too on our bio pages here. And because we're here at the Epic Vision Zone, I have one last question for you. If your life were an epic story, what would the title be?
Grit and stupidity. I joked about stupidity because I take risks that I think they're measured risks, but I take risks that maybe a lot of people would not take. For example, everyone telling me you can't have a business around civil work environments 17 years ago when I started, and they all probably thought I was a little stupid for not listening to them, but I stuck to my guns and here I am. So, and a lot of grit, a whole lot of grit and hard work.
Oh, good for you. Yeah, I'm not sure about the stupidity. There's got to be something that comes on the end of that. Grit and
I know
stupidity equals
a civil
success or
version of that.
something.
Stupidity.
Because I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
grit and
But thank
doing
you for
things
that.
that people tell me not to.
Yeah,
There we go.
yeah. Making, what is it? Don't give up your dreams just because someone threw away theirs. Yeah,
Yes,
absolutely.
yes.
Yeah.
I just want to, I'll add, I wrote a book way back when. I'm pretty sure it was called Being Exceptional. I'll have to dig it out. I just remember that something in that book has always stuck with me, which is that people who tell you no, it's because in their mind, they don't have the courage to do it and they can't recognize that you do. And so when all my friends and family way back then, they're saying don't do that because they care about me, not because they don't believe in me. And in their mind, starting a consulting business was a crazy idea. Under the realm that I was going down was even crazier. It's like, why don't you have a 9 to 5? Then we'll all know you'll be safe. And that's always stuck with me, that it's just that they don't understand the courage and the passion you have. And you can take their advice or take it in and then go, well, I'm going to do it anyway. Thank you for your opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree 100%. There's always going to be those people who the naysayers. It's
Yes.
just it's life. And there are those individuals who need that 9 to 5, that's the security. That's the life that they are comfortable in. But
Hmm.
absolutely, if we didn't have our entrepreneurs, just think of where we would be. My gosh, we
Yeah.
wouldn't even have the car.
I know.
We're
We
going
wouldn't
even
be
further
on
back.
this podcast looking at each other.
Exactly, exactly. But kudos to you. I love it. Well, thank you again, Catherine, for joining us here today and reminding us that if there's one truth this conversation makes undeniable, it's that culture is not a side conversation, it's the foundation of everything. And once again, for any information to contact or to purchase Catherine's book, you can go to the Epic Vision Zone bio pages where you will find all of her social media and direct contact information. And be sure to follow me on Instagram at Jane Applegath. Look me up at janeapplegath.com and like and subscribe to my YouTube channel, Epic Vision Zone. Sending you much love and gratitude. Until next time, stay visionary, lead with love, be epic.